Hello everybody, welcome back to another episode of the one and only Form Check Friday. I'm here with bad facial hair, bad head hair, and a couple things to say about some lifts. Now, if you're interested in submitting your lifts, you can go ahead and check the description box below with some instructions on how to send your videos in to us. So if you're interested in trying to submit, you can go ahead and just click through the description below and let's dive right in. Let's go for it today. Hopefully everybody's having a good one. Getting ready for the weekend, the freaking weekend, baby. All right, so last week we left off with Go and his two benches, right? So we've got this one bench here and you can see he misses it. We'll play that one more time. Comes down, touches, and he misses it. So what Go did was he sent in an example of him missing it, and then he sent in a video. This was about 10 minutes later where he gets it. And what I did was I wanted to ask everybody and see like what everybody thought he did right or wrong, or why he got it the second time. So most people were talking about like, oh, there was a misgroove on this first one, right? Like he obviously just kind of messed it up. It was more of a technical thing than a strength thing. And the one comment that stood out to me, let me pull it up over here, was El Truco said he drove more in a straight line second bench attempt, kept it on his tries, and the first he just yeeted it across his face right as he came off the chest for no reason and lost tightness everywhere as soon as he did that too. Now, the reason I wanted to highlight this comment from El Truco was because I honestly most of the time would disagree. I would say that pressing in a straight line is less efficient. You know, if you look up that wonderful article by Greg Nuckols on bench press bar path, you can see that, you know, when analyzing the bench press bar path of many elite lifters, like the top of the top level lifters, there's a bar path pattern of this sort of like J movement where the bar comes back and then up. The issue becomes when we get out of line through the forearm, when the weight gets back behind it. Sorry, I just keep switching back and forth between these, trying to figure out which points I want to make about which videos. But so this is the miss here, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, this is the miss. So we come down, we get the touch, and you can see the elbows start to flare out a little bit as he touches the chest. So the big thing that happens here is we end up with the bar behind the elbow by too much of a margin. Generally speaking, we want the elbow slightly in front so that as we press up, the bar like somewhat lists backwards over the chest, over the chin, and over the shoulders specifically, so that we get this nice sort of like J curve bar path. But what happens here, if we watch sort of, you know, a little bit slowly, is we come back over the chest, we get to a sticking point, and again, I do think that this is a limit lift for Go. This is probably even the rep that he makes it, the fact that he can miss it by simply just, you know, messing it up a little bit tells me that this is at least like a 9.5 or a 10. Now you might be thinking like, no way, when he gets it, it's so fast. But you know, bar speed doesn't tell the whole story. There are a lot of lifters, myself included, where, you know, it moves fast until it doesn't. It moves really fast and then all of a sudden you're gonna miss, right? So yeah, what happens here is he gets out of his groove with it. Now, the comment from El Truco, I feel like kind of almost demonizes the idea of pressing back over the shoulders, which I disagree with. But at the same time, I did want to highlight this because I don't think there should be like a dogmatic approach. And I think there are probably lifters out there who would benefit from thinking more about pressing in a straight line and less about pressing back over the shoulders. Now, whether or not that actually impacts the bar path and to what extent, you know, if we look at the lift where Go makes it here, let's pull that one up real quick. So we'll pull up the lift that he makes. So you can see, I'm gonna bet that he still presses it back a little bit. It's just a matter of like, okay, does he press it back and up, or does he press it back and back? So we still see this kind of a bar path, but the first one was probably more like this. So you can see the divergence there where we want to press it back, but we also need to catch it before it just comes back here, right? We don't want it all the way back over here where our elbow and shoulder and this pressure and force is going out and the bar is going back. So I think that's, you know, obviously the biggest thing. He just got, the bar got too far behind his elbows, and that was what caused it to tip backwards too far. So, you know, there is an interesting conversation to be had, I think, in whether or not we should be cueing lifters to press back over the face or press back over the shoulders, press back over the chest, and have that, you know, focus on more of that horizontal movement, or whether in some cases cueing lifters to think about pressing in a straight line and keeping it on the triceps, right? Like keeping the elbows tucked, pressing out and almost away in some cases might be better information, might be better cueing, might be a better way to think about the bench press. So anyways, I just thought that was an interesting discussion that we could have based on that comment. So thank you, El Truco, for leaving that one. All right, our next lifter here is Sally. So Sally has been powerlifting for about a year, and I think she included 2 sets here. So she said 1 set she's really working on trying to get, you can see like she's got quite like an exaggerated straight or even extended low back, right? We talk a lot about back position on this channel, and by the 3rd rep, you know, she's kind of tucking her hips back underneath. Now, she said that she recently switched to Sumo, so this is a relatively new movement for her. This is around 80% of her 1RM. This is, she's obviously doing 3 reps here. And you can see the 2nd set, she's tucking her hips in, intentionally rounding her back to try to get her hips closer to the bar. She says she feels a lot stronger with a flatter back, and she wants to know, you know, is it, number 1, is it okay to lift with a rounded back? And number 2, is there a way where she can, you know, get stronger at lifting with a flat back? Because she says, you know, when she lifts with this sort of technique we're seeing here in the 1st rep specifically, it feels a lot weaker. Now, I think the issue is we probably want to be somewhere in between this back position and this back position, right? We probably want to just try to find something a little more like neutral range. So if we look at maybe, so that's the 1st rep of the set, the 2nd rep, we're a little bit better position here, I think. So I still would probably get maybe a little bit more extension here, but I definitely think this 1st rep, we're kind of overdoing the extension, right? And I think a lot of times when we overdo the extension, we can be kind of negatively impacting our efficiency just as much as when we get way too flexed, right? So I wouldn't worry that this is going to hurt you, but I do think that we're going to run into lockout issues. If we look at the lockout, it's a lot more forward in the shoulders. The back is still in a slight little bit of flexion. So when you come to a limit lift, it might be really hard to get that last little bit of extension. I know you said you have no plans to compete, but you know, let's say hypothetically down the road, most of the times I'm going to treat things on this channel like people are going to compete because that's what we do. But I do think, yeah, we're gonna end up getting into some questionable lockouts once things get heavy if we're continually working on trying to like tuck the pelvis underneath. So what I would do is actually try to find a middle ground, right? And also just like, yeah, I mean, when you're changing technique, when you're switching from conventional to sumo, those kinds of things are going to necessitate a certain drop in intensity for you to be able to practice things and to cultivate new movement patterns and to work on things and to take your time with understanding positioning and practice, you know, the practice of movement just as much as getting strong, right? It's really, really important in powerlifting training that we understand that there is a skills component to strength. So yes, you can get very strong with pretty much any technique at all, but if that technique isn't the most efficient, then we're probably leaving, you know, some kilos on the platform. Some lifters just have the genetic potential to blow past that and, you know, potentially be leaving a few kilos on the platform, but still be like the best lifters in the world. But I'm going to go ahead and go out on a limb and say that's not most people. So I would say if we can get into something more like what we're seeing on this 2nd rep, where we're not quite exaggerating that extension or prioritizing that extension quite so much, we want to get into a bit of a neutral range, you know, sort of like a flat back position. And then the biggest thing here that I'm noticing is that when you start to pull from this position, we're seeing the knees come back, we're seeing the hips shoot up, and we're losing this position off the floor. So we're getting into a more stiff-legged position. Traditionally and generally speaking, when you're in a more upright position, when you're in a more a flat back position, it's gonna maybe feel a little bit more sluggish off the floor. That's normal, that's acceptable. That's part of the strength curve of the sumo deadlift. And you'll see it shift from, okay, it's tough off the floor, to when we tuck the hips like this, it's going to be tough at lockout. So it's almost a balancing act of like, okay, can we get somewhere in between these two so it's moderately tough off the floor, moderately tough at lockout, and relatively like a more even strength curve throughout, or a more even sort of velocity, maybe would be a good way of talking about it or conceptualizing it. But yeah, so I would say that I wouldn't have you intentionally push your hips into the bar like this. I think that's going to create a habit that's probably not going to pay off in the long run in terms of you're just going to start getting really stuck at lockout, which, yeah. But if we could find something like at this position, this is kind of the what I would say is maybe more of an ideal back position for you. So if you can maintain this kind of position, pull your hips down, and then keep your knees forward off the floor. Keep patient. Keep that feeling of pushing off the floor. Try to find and use your quads to initiate the lift. We want to start with knee extension. Those are the kinds of things I would have you look for there. The other thing, I'd probably ditch the shoes. These are pretty standard looking running shoes. Probably doing yourself a bit of a disservice deadlifting in them. They're just going to absorb some force. They're going to create a somewhat unstable balance when it comes to transferring force from your foot to the floor. So, I would find something a little bit more minimal, or just deadlift in your socks or sock feet, as it were. Okay, cool. Hopefully that helps you out there, Sally. Our next one comes from Adam. Now, Adam's doing some squats. Adam says this is his second set of 90 kilos, doing it for 8 reps. Now, Adam says his low back is always in pain when squatting. He says it's holding his progress back, and this is his first time wearing squat shoes. He said it didn't feel any better, and he says that the rack heights are really bad, right? I mean, obviously these are not adjustable. He says one's too high, one's too low. So couple things I notice right away here, and these may or may not have anything to do with your back pain. Unfortunately, when it comes to pain and lifting, it's very what's called multifactorial, meaning there are many different contributors, many different reasons why we feel pain. Quick little pain science lesson for all of y'all. We have these things called nociceptors, which basically transmit signals from the periphery up to the central. Right? So they're, when you burn your finger, when you scrape or cut your finger, we have different nociceptors that send a signal from the finger up to the brain. Now, it's the brain's job to process those signals and decide and to gate whether or not we feel pain, whether or not you're actually going to pull away. If we don't have that response, then we don't feel pain. So we don't actually feel pain here, we feel pain here. Interesting and I think worthwhile distinction when it comes to trying to understand why there might be so many factors influencing whether or not we feel pain in a certain setting or in a certain range of motion or whatever. Now, because of the way that pain works, a lot of science over the last little while has kind of unearthed the fact that pain is influenced by social factors. So, whether or not you feel like you're in a threatening environment, whether or not you feel like you are in a comfortable environment, and biopsychosocial, right? Psychological factors, like, again, whether or not you feel like you should be afraid, whether you're afraid of a movement, which is why I often talk about and try to get lifters to not be afraid of things when it comes to pain and injury, because that is harmful or not helpful at the very least. And lastly, there are biological factors. There are sort of more biomechanical reasons why we have pain. Things can break, tear, whatever. But there are a lot of different reasons why we feel pain. So all that to say that the technique assessment here may or may not actually solve your pain. It might have something to do with it, but there could be a ton of different reasons. And often when we look at why athletes run into pain problems, generally speaking, it's a load management issue. It's doing too much, whether that's too much intensity, too much volume, lifting too often, lifting, I think I said intensity, but too heavy, right? It's more those things than it is like, oh, you're lifting wrong and your technique is quote unquote bad. Anyways, that's my pain science rant for the day. So what I am noticing in your technique is that you're very far on your toes in the bottom. You're very far on your toes. You're very tipped out. If we were to look at sort of the center of the foot, let's just draw a line up from the center of the foot. So you are like out in front of your toes. Now, this could be putting some strain, some pressure on your back, because all of a sudden this lever's way out here and we're having to do a lot more work with the low back and hips. Now, I'm not going to say this is going to solve your pain, but if we can get our feet flat, if we can keep that heel down, if we can keep this bar more over that center of gravity instead of way out on the toes, that might help. That might have some contributor to allowing you to get back into some pain-free movement. So what I would do is I would probably lighten the load on the bar. You said you have 90 kilos on there. You're doing it for a set of 8, maybe 90 kilos for 3, maybe 70 kilos for 8, something like that. Just dial things back. Practice the movement. Like I was saying with that last, with Sally and her deadlift there, we have to be conscious of the skills component of lifting just as much as we do the strength component of lifting. Powerlifting is a specific strength. It's the skill of being specifically strong, if you want to kind of wrap all those concepts in one. So yeah, we're very far on the toes. The knees are traveling really far forward, which is not a problem. But when the knees traveling really far forward puts you way out on your toes and the bar's way out in front of you, then yeah, that's going to create at the very least some balance issues. So number one, slow things down, right? Descend with a little bit more intention on keeping weight on your heels, on sitting and reaching your butt back behind you. Get a box, right? I know a lot of raw lifters hate on box squats a lot. It's funny. I coach a lifter who recently just put up the 3rd biggest total in the 84 kilo weight class of all time. And we box squat in her programming all the time. So there's that. But yeah, reach, the box can be a great cue to help you reach back. Now, I don't recommend with box squats a lifter like sit down and then sit upright and like relax on it and then rock themselves forward. I've seen a number of different ways to perform box squats, but generally I would just use the box as something to cue yourself to sit back to, like touch it, lightly the way you would touch a paused bench on your chest if you're doing a light touch bench press, and then use that as a cue to kind of sit back and like a physical kind of feedback to sit back and touch your butt on it and then come back up. The other thing is I think we're a little shy on depth on some of these, and I think if you were to go all the way to depth, that would probably give you an indication of what it feels like to be back more. Because I think you can only get so deep coming forward like this. I think if you were to like stretch yourself into a lower position, you'd inevitably have to, or necessarily have to rock back a little bit. So anyways, my man, I hope some of that helps you, and I hope that you can lift without pain soon. It sucks. It's unfortunately, it's, something that we deal with as athletes, as lifters. But I've had this conversation with a number of people a number of times. You can you can be in pain and you can hurt from lifting and doing cool shit like lifting, being active, climbing, skiing, snowboarding, whatever your thing is, or you can hurt from sitting around and being sedentary. So might as well hurt because you're doing cool shit. Anyways, and all that is not to be doom and gloom and say that pain is inevitable or that we have to be in pain, but just that it will probably occur at some point, and it's okay. You're going to be all right. Okay, anyways, moving on. Laura. So Laura's doing a set of 9 on the bench at, she calls it a 9.5 RPE. She's been benching for 7 months now. Wants to start pausing her reps for longer, but she says she has some issues with, working the pause in, and that kind of stuff. And she feels like she's losing tension on the way up and just kind of wants a sort of general review of her technique. So you can see here, taking some effort to get into a little bit of an arch here to get the shoulder blades down and back into that good position and to get some leg drive to contribute to that sort of chest up concept that we talk about a lot on the channel. So pretty good setup so far. Let's see if we maintain all of that as we unrack. That would be my concern, is that we put all this effort into creating this position and then we go to unrack and we just flatten out. Let's see if it happens. So not really, right? You managed to maintain a decent bit of tension and pressure. I think we could be better. I think it could be better. I might move the pin down in the rack a little bit. I don't know if you can see those tiny little dots I made here, but unracking from a lower height a lot of the times will allow you to keep more retraction in your shoulder blades as opposed to having to reach out and grab the bar from further away from you. So in a lot of cases, the unrack can be a big thing. The next thing I would do is I would probably tuck the elbows slightly, right? We can see that the elbow is maybe barely behind the bar here, right? If we draw a line straight down, right? The elbow's in line with or barely behind the bar. And generally, I would say that we do want the elbow slightly in front. And again, this is that bar path thing we were talking about, right? But for most people, when the elbow's back like this, we can see this sort of like internal rotation of the shoulder, where the elbow or the shoulder is sort of shrugged up, elevated, and that humerus, or the head of the humerus up here, is internally rotated. It's turned in this way, where if we externally rotate, a lot of times that elbow is going to go slightly down this way. So it's going to put the shoulder in a potentially more advantaged position. It's going to contribute more to that chest up, maintaining your sort of overall extension in the back, limiting the range of motion, more stability from having the shoulder blades flat into the bench, etc. So that would be number one. Is you can see the path of the elbows here is more like this as opposed to like this, right? So if we watch this, we'll just watch this descent, right? Your elbows come down like this. And what I would like to see is more like this. I guess the elbows aren't going to come back this far, but from here, I'd like to see the elbows stay more tucked. In terms of the pauses, it's kind of just like you just have to do it. What I would say is like, okay, you're doing sets of 9 at 9.5 RPE. Like, let's do some sets of 3 to 5. Let's do them at 8 RPE. I think that's a great sort of intensity where you're still going to get a really good strength training effect. But like I was saying earlier, you're going to get that skills training benefit of being able to, cultivate good habits with your technique and being able to be conscious of how you're moving and all these kinds of things. So can be really important to just do things at a bit of a lesser RPE. A lot of the times training with less reps makes it easier to maintain or to cultivate good technique throughout a set. But I'm not one to count out doing high rep comp work. So hopefully some of that critique helps you out, Laura. I know you've been if I'm not mistaken, you've been a follower of our channel for a long time. So it's cool to see one of your videos come through the queue. So thanks for supporting us all these years. All right, Charles. So this is Charles's second time ever deadlifting. So shout outs to Charles for being brave enough to send this in. I think a lot of people their first couple times deadlifting are like, ooh, I don't want people to watch me. But good on you, Charles, for being like, you know what, man, I want to get better. I'm going to send this in. I'm going to put myself in this like somewhat vulnerable position of being like roasted on the internet, and I'm going to get better. So kudos, man. I think that's cool. I think that's smart. So yeah, it looks like we're having a little bit of a time trying to set up and figure out where things need to be. There's a lot of like up and down and feeling around and that kind of stuff. So the number one thing, like this is actually a pretty decent start position, man. We're maybe a little bit overdoing the extension here. So I would cue a little bit of ribs down to try to get a little bit more like anterior bracing, try to feel your abs a little bit more. It also looks like we're a little shrugged up, but I think that's because we're looking up like this. So what I would do is see how your back is kind of, this is the angle of your back here, and then all of a sudden your neck goes like this. So what I would do is just try to like continue this line out this way. So that's going to mean you're looking here. And that would be the first adjustment I would make, is like, don't crane your neck to look up. Don't worry so much about that extension because you got a pretty good position. Charles said he's been lifting over a month now, a little over a month now. He's doing it to lose weight. He really likes doing the big lifts, but he's a little bit afraid of hurting himself. So hopefully some of that stuff I talked about in terms of like pain science and that kind of stuff helped. Ditch the fear, man. Ditch the fear. It's probably going to happen at some point, but it's probably going to be minor and you're going to bounce back. And it's probably not going to happen for a long time, right? You can probably deadlift and get strong for years before you run into any pain issues. Other than, I know you said you hurt your back the first time you were deadlifting, so that kind of, shoots a hole in my initial theory there. But I would say be confident in your return to activity here. So I can't really see from the front. I feel like we might be pushing the knees out a little bit too much. You said that you do some cleans as well, and this looks like much more like an Olympic sort of clean starting position to me than it does a deadlift starting position. But when we bring the hips up like this, I like this start position quite a bit, actually. Just don't look up. Look out this way. Try to bring those shoulder blades down. Try to feel the lats down into your butt, right? Try to protect your armpit. If you can imagine like turning your elbows towards the back of the room, That little bit of external rotation in some cases really helps to get the lats going, and to get us feeling that kind of scapular depression. We want the anti-shrug, right? So if you look at my shoulders, this is the shrug. What's the opposite? The anti-shrug. The anti-shrug is what we want when we're deadlifting. Depression, scapular depression. The shoulder blades moving downwards towards your butt. So let's take a look at the actual movement. It looks pretty good. It looks like we're really wide for a conventional deadlift. So I would probably narrow that up. Think like shoulder or hip width if you look straight down, right? If we're outside of that, we're maybe, creating more range of motion for ourselves than we need to. So that would be something I would be conscious of there. Now, the other thing is when we start the deadlift, what we're seeing is everything shift back and up like this. We're going into like a stiff-legged pattern. So really try to keep those knees forward. Try to maintain this back angle. Don't let it turn into that back angle, right? See how everything shoots up? The knees shoot back, the hips shoot up. Keep those knees forward. Be patient. When you're doing a deadlift, don't think so much about pulling on the bar. Think about pushing the floor away, right? The whole idea of the deadlift is we want to get braced as tight as we can with our trunk, and then we want to use our legs to push the floor away while the trunk just maintains the brace. We don't need to be pulling back. We don't need to be like trying to, do much of that stuff. At least not right now. Those aren't the cues I would advise you to focus on anyways. So really try to get into that feeling of pushing the floor away, of using your quads. So that was a really good start to the lift right here. See, really great there, but then we started to rush it. We had the hips shoot back again, and I think this stance is a little bit wide. Maybe just deadlift in your socks instead of these shoes, and let's change where we're looking. So yeah, man, honestly, for your second time deadlifting, this looks pretty damn good. Ditch the fear that you're gonna hurt yourself again. Go slow with your loading. Add 5 pounds every week or every other week. Try to work up to doing some work at an intensity that you can maintain, right? We don't need to be maxing out. You don't have to go heavy to get strong, at least not for a while anyways. But yeah, man, stick with it, Charles. Okay, this is Joshua. So Joshua says he's 38. He's been lifting for just over 3 years, and this is 330 for a triple at RPE 10. He says this is pretty indicative of his squats by the third rep. He says rep 1's good, rep 2 degrades a little bit, and rep 3 is what more of his squats look like, where he gets into this kind of squat morning pattern, hips shoot up, and some of that kind of stuff. So Joshua is looking for some critique on his squat. So we talked a little bit in the comments last time about bench press, and what would have made the lifter miss that rep. What I want from y'all is, has anyone out there dealt with this sort of squat morning pattern? If so, where did you pick up those habits? How did you fix them? And what were the cues or exercises that helped you overcome these technical faults? How did you go from falling forward in the squat to being able to stay more upright? And also, if you see anything else in Joshua's squats, I'd love to hear it. So go ahead and leave a comment below. Let us know. I forgot to mention this earlier, but our apparel is going to be launching on Tuesday at 10 a.m. Mountain Time. And make sure you check that out, calgarybarbell.com, as well as the Calgary Barbell training app and coaching services, all that stuff at calgarybarbell.com. And I think that's it. So yeah, hopefully everybody has a good one. Enjoy your weekend, and we will see y'all next week. Bye-bye.